James, we have a really good topic today, and it's about technical debt. So please start out. Help me out here. Give me some good advice. Just one little piece of tip, one tip, good advice on dealing with technical debt.
I think the first thing you should do when it comes to dealing with technical debt is make sure you understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish with it so that you can have realistic expectations of what you can get done.
Good advice. All right, Sam, I'd like you to do the complete opposite. Give me some bad advice on dealing with technical debt.
I think some bad advice related to this is you should lose the list of all the one-off exceptions that you put in place for all the workarounds for the system that you implemented.
Oh, that is some bad advice. All right, James, you've got a challenge. Give me some worse advice on dealing with technical debt.
Let's see. Create a bounty program that only incentivizes finding the technical debt, not actually coming up with a solution.
Oh, that'll be a lot of fun. All right, let's begin this.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
All right, welcome to Super Cyber Friday, our very last one in 2024. So thank you for everybody who joined us today. We have a great show for you. Today's topic is hacking technical debt, an hour of critical thinking about strategically modernizing your infrastructure. I can't believe we've been doing this show for so many years and we haven't tackled this because this is a great, great topic. All right, our two guests, you just saw them a second ago. It's Sam Jocks, who's the VP of Clinical Engineering over at McLaren Healthcare, and James Hosworth, who's a Principal Consultant over at Guide Point Security. Guess what? Guide Point Security is our wonderful sponsor for today's episode. Thank you so much, Guide Point, for making this happen. Hey, let's talk about all the different wonderful ways to participate. Let's focus on number 2 and 3. Our bad idea is how not to manage technical debt. I'm sure you guys are going to be creative. I want this one. You want to come out of the gates lots and lots of bad ideas, especially from people who have never submitted bad ideas. I want you to submit them. Now, as I always mock, you always come up with more bad ideas than good ideas, but let's see if you can one-up that. Let's see if you can give us more 10% better tips on how to better plan for technical debt. Remember, you can always participate in the chat room. If you would like to come on video and ask a question or make a comment, just say, bring me on. We'll do our best to do that. Bring you on. Ask a question for our guest. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a speech bubble with a question mark. Click on that, put a question in there. And we have a submitted question for our Super Cyber meetup at the end, but I'll bring that up at the end and vote for your favorite question as well. Just one more thing. Our schedule today, we're going to play the public interest. We'll play the Department of Yes. We will also have our meetup, which happens on Discord. Please stick around for that. That link at the bottom of the screen will change to that. But actually, what the link is right now is our next show. Believe it or not, our next show is not going to be until January 24th. Yes, we're going to be off for well over 5 weeks. Before that, closer to 6, it sounds like. So please go ahead and register for our next one. Tell all your friends to register. It's going to be hacking platformization. We are going to bend what you normally think about platformization then. All right. Oh, yes, and stick around for our meetup. That link will change to that at the end. But if you're not already on Discord, make sure you're on Discord for just that. All right, I've gone on and on, but let's talk about our show today. And that is going to be talking about technical debt. So let me start with you, James. How do you define what technical debt is? So we have a basis of what our discussion is going to be.
Sure. So I would define technical debt as kind of a lot of the housekeeping items that aren't necessarily, at least in the short term, considered critical for the function of an organization. Right. So they're the corners that are cut effectively as you continue to grow and scale different operations, regardless of architecture, engineering, or operations.
All right. And Sam, what would you add to that? And also answer, give me the wide breadth of what technical debt is, because I know you've dealt with it on multiple extremes.
Yeah, so I'm from the healthcare sector, and so fundamentally, right, we look at technical debt as anything that you put off now and that you plan to do in the future from a reworking perspective, right? We'll do this later because we don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the effort, the energy now to address it. And this can be everything. This can be infrastructure, this can be software based, this could be code based, this could be library based. I mean, anything within your tech stack from the top down. And so it's really hard to track because it happens at so many levels. And so many intrinsic decisions are made without really even capturing the downstream implications of them, that this debt just piles up and we run into it on a regular basis.
I love that definition of putting off something you know you should do. I think that's a great definition of what it is, because it's like one of those things, like, people say, pornography. I know it when I see it. Technical debt. I know it when I see it, kind of a thing. I don't know. I didn't think I'd make an analogy between pornography and technical debt, but I just did that. That's exactly what I just did. But it is kind of, I know it when I see it, right, James?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that generally isn't identified until it either bites you or you're financially incentivized to take care of it in some way, shape, or form. So, when you look at identity, right, a lot of the frameworks have been changing, cyber insurance requirements have been changing, et cetera, to bring things into the fold now that are priorities that yesterday were considered kind of nice to haves or additional duties of a different team. Now you're seeing entire new kind of infrastructures built within an IT security stack and organizations to deal with what was yesterday was technical debt, and today is now a number one priority that has to be, taken care of, or our insurance premium is going to go up 2x next month.
But Sam, the other issue is what's always ironic is what is today's technical debt was yesterday's, state of the art solution, right? And so the question is, it's not future proofing, but how do you make a plan for today's state of the art will become technical debt one day? Is there a way to do that?
And it really depends on what your organization's roadmap looks like, right? So, and I'll give you an example, right? Our organization is an acquisition organization. My healthcare organization buys other healthcare organizations. We are always going to be in this technical debt location because I buy locations and they are in distress, right? I am going to always be in a negative debt where I've got to fix somebody else's stuff. And I saw some comments around, we're just going to acquire someone and then fire all their staff members, right? And not figure out how to resolve
Again,
their
I'm assuming that was a bad idea. I'm assuming that
was
was labeled bad idea, not 10% better.
It actually happens all the time. Trust me. But to future-proof something like that, you have to understand where your organization is and what the goals are, right? If you are an organization that acquires, you have to know that you are acquiring technical debt, and you have to allocate the appropriate resources to identify and mitigate it. If you don't, to James's point, you're going to get bit, and you're going to get bit hard.
What would you add to that, James?
I couldn't agree more with all of that, right? And at the end of the day, a lot of it too has to kind of deal with understanding the downstream effects of dealing with said technical debt and not creating emergencies by trying to solve something that looks relatively simple, right? So in a lot of areas, especially today, you see a lot of organizations, zero trust is the buzzword, right? Everybody's focusing on zero trust. In reality, zero trust is just a massive exercise in dealing with technical debt. To your point earlier, yesterday's next gen is tomorrow or today's technical debt, right? And so we'll find ourselves where it's like, well, we're going to do network segmentation, zero trust, yay. And as soon as they start trying to map the zero trust principles to all the other verticals, they realize like, oh, well, actually, we didn't even take into account that we have Macs and Windows in our environment, and we never actually got any real management software for the Macs because it was a small enough group, and we just didn't think that getting, the particular management software for it that we wanted was important because we wanted to save money, et cetera, et cetera. The excuses, are a mile long, right? And then you look at, again, identity is the playground that I usually swing in, right? You start mapping identity principles within the zero trust ecosystem, and everybody just looks at Active Directory and goes,
oh my God.
They have no idea what to do with all these non-human identities and all these privileged accounts that can traverse all of those network, segmentation practices and controls we put in place so hard. We spent millions of dollars making that happen, only to know that it's effectively a paper tiger check the box at the end of the day because we didn't do the whole thing, right? And 9 times out of 10, when you're trying to, deploy this next gen technology or even bring next gen, principles into an organization, you end up thinking that you're just walking up maybe a decently inclined hill, and you're actually facing a sheer mountainside of technical debt that's ensuring that your organization can't even integrate half of its applications with this given piece of tech that's been brought in.
I want to address this quote that Andrew Aiken put up, and I have up here. When any system is no longer able to be updated, it graduates to become technical debt. Now, there's all agreement here, but I think if it's at that point, I don't think you want to get to that point. That's we call that extreme technical debt, maybe. Yes.
Well, but I'm going to tell you, right, and again, I'm in the healthcare vertical. You have to understand that every vertical works a little bit differently. And I'd love to work in James's vertical where all we have are workstations to deal with. I deal with medical devices, right? Medical devices, right, work on operating systems that haven't been patched in a decade. So my technical debt load is like infinite, right? I don't even have a number to quantify.
Right. That's not an easy one to solve. Yes, I know that.
Right.
But fundamentally, right, without the appropriate upgrades, it becomes very difficult to go ahead and quantify and mitigate all of the technical debt you have. And so you're creating compensating controls. And if we get into the security world, right, how do I mitigate all the security risks that you have? And in reality, what you're doing is you're creating more technical debt to try and mitigate all of these other compensating controls that you're putting in place, and you're making it much more complicated to manage, right? The fundamental system that you need in our instance to provide care that's too expensive to replace, right? And so instead of fixing our technical debt, we're using more technical debt to try and make it better, which is bad, right? And we can't get out of this crazy loop. It will never fix itself, and it's very difficult. And so I will say that James's comment around trying to implement some of these big principles and you're scaling a mountain is really, really where we're at, right? In a reality, it's very complicated to implement some of these cutting edge principles just because of the amount of debt that we're all carrying.
All right, that actually brings up a good point right there, Sam. And let's like the classic, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Let's talk about some one bite techniques we can do, of which, by the way, I think we're getting flooded with some 10% better tips, and that's why we call it 10% better. We're not asking solve everything. Actually, it should probably be called 2% better. So give us an idea. What are some good early stage ways to start biting away at technical debt? Because I think also one of the reasons we don't deal it is because you see how painful it's going to be. It's like, I don't even want to start, kind of a thing. Yes, James?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, a 2 to 10% better thing is just simply adjusting the way you approach new initiatives in your environment from a technology perspective, whether it's security based or not, frankly. A lot of folks, a lot of organizations, whether it's individual contributors, teams, all the way up to the board, they'll get really, really focused on what a new piece of technology or what a new principle, what they want the outcome to be, versus first evaluating what the dependencies are. Right. And the dependencies are where you're going to find the technical debt that has to be tackled. So if you're focused initially on let's define what our dependencies are to accomplish a given goal, along with how many people we need, how much budget we need, et cetera, which you could consider those things obviously dependencies as well. So I'm purely talking about the tech. But if you say, hey, my outcome is I want to have positive control over privileged access across my entire environment, a dependency of that is understanding what credentials are privileged and understanding the fact that a part of your technical debt from a policy perspective turns out to be that you've never actually even defined what privileged access is. But that's upstream about 9 miles of the technology that you're trying to put in place, right? So a lot of people want to skip all the blocking and tackling when it comes to these types of things, whereas evaluating the blocking and tackling requirements of a given endeavor are how you also identify the technical debt risks that are explicit to that. But that's what helps you really articulate.
Speaking of that, look at Peter Schwacker's quote I just put up there. Anybody add compounding or aging assets to their risk calculations? Nodding heads, yes. So this becomes probably a discussion you have like, here's new risk we have because this equipment is now becoming old, difficult to patch, not patchable, yada, yada, yada. So when does that risk sort of get people to pull the trigger of we're dealing with this now, Sam? And I know that varies greatly dealing with the technical debt you're managing.
It does. It varies greatly, and that conversation gets to be very interesting. But I've seen, and I'm going to tie to some of the comments that are in here. It ties to what the actual technology does, right? So if we're trying to solve a problem and it's a niche problem, right, I may need to keep that technology because it solves a very unique problem. However, if it's not a unique problem and I have a niche solution, that risk conversation gets very, very easy to have. You have a niche solution. It doesn't meet our aging needs. It doesn't meet our risk needs. It doesn't meet our technical debt needs, right? Let's get rid of it. Let's go to a standard. And the standard then helps us reduce everything, our risk, our technical debt, this, that, and the next thing. Those conversations, though, need to be at an organizational risk management type of level. And I think a lot of organizations haven't matured to the point where we're actually having robust risk management conversations yet. And so, right, the more an organization can grow into that kind of culture, the better off, right, the long-term planning can be to tackle some of these really, really complicated conversations around, do I do A or do I do B, right? In my world, right, standardization is one of the key ways that we slowly but surely tackle some of our debt that we have out there, because all of the one-off type systems that we have, you can't continue to upgrade and patch and be sustainable from a revenue perspective.
By the way, I just posted Paul Lanzi's only rollout end of life solutions, because your technical debt doesn't grow. It's bad and it stays bad. That is, by the way, Paul, fantastic advice.
Oh, God.
We got our first game.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right. I have not created this game. Our fantastic producer, Rich Straffolino, is responsible. So I'm going to play along with you. Let's see how the two of you do. This is how it's played. Watch. Most average monthly search queries. Now, it's just for this word. And again, we use a tool that tells us how many searches per word via Google. Again, it's not just cybersecurity people. It's everybody. Which of the three, legacy, maintenance, or testing, do you think gets the most?
Probably
Testing.
maintenance.
Ooh, controversy.
You're saying testing, James, and you're saying
Yes.
I'll say maintenance.
maintenance. I'm gonna split. I'm gonna go legacy. Let's see. One of us is gonna win. We'll find out. It is maintenance. All right.
Wow.
Sam is on the board. Very good. All
You
right.
guys got to take care of your cars. You got to take care of all your stuff in your house.
By the way, I'm surprised legacy came too, but testing.
Ooh.
Remember, who's just
Wow.
typing? Now, here's what I find. This is just the word. Who's typing in just maintenance or legacy and testing it like with nothing? But people do that. I don't know what the heck they're trying to find. But all right, Sam, let me just tell you, getting 4 for 4 for this game is not easy. So only a few people have actually done it. So let's see if you can pull it off. All right, configuration, dependency, or scalability. Which one do you think gets the most queries?
Ooh, configuration is my choice.
Yeah, I think I'll go with configuration.
Yeah, I think I'm going with you. I don't think anyone's searching dependency or scalability. All right, we're all going D. Let's see what happens. Yes, we are all correct. All right.
Yeah.
Samantha is 2 for 2. You and I, James, are 1 for 2. Here we go. Total of 4 questions we're getting here. Here's number 3. Backlog, documentation, or refactor. I think just because documentation is the most common word there, I'm going with that. H.
Yeah,
same.
I would agree. I don't even know who types in refactor. I would love to know what that
Refactor,
number is.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody
No.
needs to define it.
All right. All right. Documentation. We're all going for H. Let's see what happens. We are all correct. All right. Sam, you have an opportunity to go for 4 for 4. You are going to be in an elite group if you can pull this off. What's the next one? Whoops. Let's do this again. Okay. Agile development, continuous integration, or life cycle.
I'm going to go life cycle just because it's only one word.
I'm going the same way as you on this one. I'm going L. I'm going life cycle.
Yeah, I think I'll stick with the group. I think, only the geeks know what agile development actually is.
And continuous integration. Yeah, that's. Yeah, we're
Just fight over the definition.
I think life cycle is going to be the answer. I feel confident on this one.
Oh
No! Oh my God!
Really?
Continuous.
Sam, I was rooting for
integration. I don't even know what that is. Continuous integration. That
That's a
sounds like something a
shocker.
consultant would come
Buzzword
up with,
or
James.
buzz
Right?
statement.
Like,
yes,
That
hey,
is-
I'm with you.
I am completely and utterly shocked by that. That threw me for a
Wow.
loop. I'd be interested in anyone in the chat room got that one. Continuous integration.
It looked like everybody was with us on that. From what I was
Yeah.
that's all right.
All right. Well, there we go.
Well,
All right,
was cool.
James. Let me ask you a question. So I want to thank your company, Guidepoint Security, for sponsoring our discussion here. It's been fantastic. And by the way, I'm going to get, normally I give the chat room a lot of crap because they don't have enough 10% better tips or not enough bad ideas. But man, you are flooding both. So keep them coming. I'm very impressed with all of that. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, James.
Sure.
Technical debt. I think we'd all like a little help in dealing with it. How does Guidepoint Security help organizations with dealing with tech debt? Where is your superpower in this area?
Sure. So Guidepoint Security is mainly focused in the cybersecurity space, right? But basically across every vertical you can imagine, right? From application security, obviously IAM, network security, I mean, you name it. We have both account executives and vendor partnerships and things like that help with the purchasing of the appropriate technology to address the risk. But we're a VAR, we're value added reseller, right? So the value add part of it is all of our services teams as well that come in behind all of that technology and not only help implement it from like a greenfield perspective or MVP, but we also help clients roadmap and develop their plans, their realistic expectations for what they're going to get out of the technology, the gotchas, et cetera. So like 80% of our personnel have a technical background, right? So when you're getting advised by somebody at Guidepoint, you're not being advised by somebody who simply read a book. You're being advised by somebody, like myself, who was an engineer that was hands-on, that got frankly kicked in the face by technical debt from a variety of different directions and had to take some of these next gen technologies and in some cases borderline reverse engineer them to address those items and mitigate that risk, or advise their leadership in those tough conversations that say, hey, look, I understand you wanted this thing and you wanted this thing done inside of 3 months, but it's actually going to take 6. And here are all the reasons why. Nobody wants to have that conversation, but it's a common one to have. And it's one of many that we're really good at coming in and advising clients on. So it's not just the technology, right? Technical debt is something that requires a significant amount of empathy, especially from a consulting perspective, because we get that it's a challenge. We get that there are bandwidth issues and budget issues and things like that. So our focus is, how do we help you get where you want to go as fast as possible with the least amount of risk?
So let's stress the empathy. So if you call Guidepoint Security, you won't have a conversation that goes, "You idiot! Why did you let this happen?" you want to have one of those conversations?
No. We'll have a conversation like, "Hey, I've been there, and this is how we address."
We've all been there, and let me say, we all right agree here. It sucks. But I will say this: for everyone who's been there, and they took the pain and they got to the other side. The other side is always better. It's always, nobody looks back and saying, that wasn't worth doing that. Like, don't you agree?
Nice.
Like everyone agrees. Yeah. Like it was worth the pain to get there. Just no one wanted to deal with the pain. It's like going in for any kind of dental work. I know I want to do this. I know I should do this. It's going to hurt a lot, but I'll feel a lot better at the other end. So sure. I think we'll just, Guidepoint is your dentist. Go to them regularly.
And it'll be expensive. So, right, get your checkbook out.
If you have your insurance, it shouldn't be too bad. All right. With all this said, we just put up a poll. So if you look on the icons on the right, there's one poll that looks like a little mini bar chart. Click on that. If you'd like a nice warm handoff to the fine people at Guidepoint Security, who will not malign you when you tell them about your technical debt issues. And then they will find an appropriate time to make that dental visit to get this thing solved.
As painless as possible.
As painless as possible. All right. There was a good question that came in from Paul Lanzi that I want to ask you this one here. Let's just start answering this one. Here we go. Which of the categories of security solutions, I like this one, endpoint security, identity, vulnerability management. By the way, I know, Sam, you can pick up others that are not in the security category that are far worse. But let's just stay with the classic security categories. Which one accrues tech debt the fastest? Is that also the one that requires the largest financial investment to mitigate technical debt? I'm going to start with you, James, on this one. Maybe like historically, this is what we see each time happening. Maybe you can answer it that way.
So I would say, and not just because I work in the identity field, but I think it's quantifiable, right? So when you look at identities, especially if you include non-human identity and secrets, it's, there's a different number all over Google, but at the end of the day, it's like 20 something to 1 on average at every single organization. And the reason why I think it kind of not necessarily beats out, but scales beyond is because identity has always existed, right? There was never an industry that had to come first and then there was identity. ever since people hired someone else using a sheet of paper in a file cabinet, right? There have been identities, there have been different levels of privilege, et cetera. And part of the reason why the technical debt in identity is so massive is because identity didn't come into the limelight as its own kind of security discipline or vertical until relatively recently, right? I can remember a time when I was a hands-on engineer where PCI DSS updated their requirements to include something as simple as MFA, which of course today is considered kind of blocking and tackling. But back then it was, what do you mean I have to put this app on my phone? Yada, yada. And that was, within the last 10, 15 years that these kinds of changes have come. But the problem has existed for decades. How many organizations today still use Active Directory, for example, as the foundation for their entire identity posture? And everybody knows that that's like a coin operated vulnerability machine, but everybody is so dependent on it, right, that they can't get away from it necessarily, or they choose not to because the cost of time, money, and resources is high.
Just the password itself is technical debt. Yes. It's antiquated. All right, Sam, I'm interested in your answer on this one. What do you think accrues the fastest?
So, and I would agree, but I'm going to flip the coin because of the vertical I'm in, right? So, for organizations that don't have standard laptop, right, type of deployments, right? For us, it's actually the vulnerability management type of areas, right? Because I have 90,000 assets I manage, but they're 8,000 different vendors and 5,000 different makes and models. So try to manage vulnerabilities across 5,000 different makes and models and 9,000 different vendors. It is absolutely ludicrous for us. And so defer is like our favorite word. And so the accrual for technical debt is astonishing. And so we use, just like everybody else, risk-based management to go, you're not that risky. We're not going to focus on you. We'll put you off till later. And the technical debt just grows. So I realize that's very specific from a healthcare focus, right? Or anybody truly that has a very diverse kind of infrastructure. But I agree with James, right? We still have the same identity issues he's talking about, right? I still have all the endpoint identity, right, to connect to my 90,000 different devices. And so it literally is a dartboard for us to throw, right, darts, and you can hit debt anywhere within our infrastructure.
Convenience and cost are the parents of tech debt. I like that. That's a good line, James Sparenberg. Nice. Good job. So let me ask you the flip side, and tell me if there's any advantage to this. There are minor tech debts. And is there value to, and they like barely move the needle in terms of risk, but maybe give me an example of a really minor tech debt, and is it worth it to deal with it because A, it's probably easy, and maybe people could see like a tiny small win? Is there I don't even know, what would be a good example of a minor tech debt?
I mean, exceptions are a good example of this, right? So you have and I'm going to steal an identity management example from James, right? You have an admin who's not supposed to have the read or write rights to some file. You're going to give her an exception because she wants to do some work for her exec. You forget about said exception, and all of a sudden, she's now no longer part of the organization. But that's so low risk from a risk management perspective. It's not something that you're really worried about. Now, I will say there are exceptions out there that do give us heartburn and we do want to track, but in general, most exception management processes don't necessarily, in our mind, add massive amounts of risk to our tech debt.
Okay, that's good. All right, let's go to questions that are coming in, which we're getting a lot.
Too much wine.
Okay.
Move fast and break things. I like that. That was history, right? Move fast and break things.
Okay. This is just sort of more of a philosophical question from Chris Fontaine, who, by the way, if anyone has not seen those photos of Chris Fontaine from Disney World, you don't know this, but from our last show we did last week, there were jokes that were being made about my face being tattooed on people's bodies, and Chris suggested putting on a t-shirt and going to Disney World, and he literally did that the next day. He took a t-shirt with my face on it and went to Disney World, and there's photos of him in Epcot wearing a T-shirt of my face on it. And he said 19 people came up to him and asked him about it, saying where he could get that.
Very nice, Chris.
Astonished. Yeah, kudos to Chris on this one. So he's got this question. My question is this. I have heard, quote, technical debt decried as a catch-all excuse for poor planning or a vague justification for overhauls without introspection. Just curious what your take is on that. I think it's what I said earlier is when it was implemented, it was state-of-the-art. It's not anymore. I mean, you know, it's easy to say that now when it looks like crap. Yes, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very easy to armchair your quarterback yourself into analysis paralysis when it comes to what is technical debt, what's not, what caused it, et cetera. And unfortunately, in some organizations, not all, of course, but in some organizations, that can almost turn into kind of one of two things, either kind of a witch hunt mentality, or, hey, we're going to create this risk register, and suddenly the risk register, even though it has the best of intentions of quantifying risk and tackling it, just turns into the dumping ground for all risk. Like, well, is it on the risk register? Well, yeah. Okay, well, then we're good, right? There's no discussion around actually mitigating it, right? So the kind of parallel that I draw with this kind of stuff is like forest management, right? In a lot of areas that are prone to forest fires, they still use fire to solve the problem. They just control when that happens. So technical debt is very similar in that way. Dealing with technical debt, there are going to be, change freezes that affect your ability to deal with it. There are going to be scheduled outages and things like that. A scheduled outage is simply taking something bad that nobody likes, which is an outage, and planning it to accomplish a given task, right? Broadly. And 9 times out of 10, when you're dealing with technical debt, you're doing that exact thing, which is very similar to the controlled burns that Forest Services do to help control all of that additional brush that's fallen off the trees, i.e. all of this next gen technology you have. Here and there, a branch is going to fall off in the form of technical debt to the ground. If you let it build up, you get a forest fire, right? If you manage it correctly and effectively, you do controlled burns to ensure that the whole forest stays healthy, knowing that you will always have to do that. There will always be some semblance of technical debt in the environment. So it's not about, getting rid of all of it. It's about managing it, i.e. perfect being the enemy of good at the end of the day.
All right, I'm going to ask this question of you, Sam, and this comes from David Sledge as well. Is it possible to address technical debt without solid governance in place? But I'm going to ask also the opposite of that is, with solid governance, how does that help your technical debt too?
So yeah, it's able. You can go ahead and address technical debt. I'm going to tell you, you're going to need some good technical folks on the IT side to be able to identify and mitigate it without the governance, right? Mm-hmm. You can't address technical debt without governance, without a good IT, right? You're up a creek if you don't have both or either. But I will say governance helps to create the prioritization, right? We all have mounds of technical debt, and sometimes it's hard for IT to prioritize. And so where the governance really comes in is to block and tackle from a priority perspective. So maybe you don't have the right resources, you need more people, you need more money, right? You need more time, you need somebody to slow down their favorite project that, right, flew in and absolutely has to be done tomorrow. Those kinds of things governance groups can help with, so that you can actually address your technical debt. And it's not something that's just, right, 5th on your list of 5 things to do, and maybe you'll get to it by the time you retire, right? Real good teams, right, tackle technical debt on a regular basis. But the way to really enforce it from an ongoing perspective is to really get it in front of your governance teams and really have your governance teams bought into the fact that you need to continue to support the foundation of your organization, right, and shore up your foundation, and right, to James's point, clear out, right, all of your fire risk, right, in your forest, because at some point, right, if we don't do that, we're going to be in a much worse place than we are today.
Let me ask you this question, this quote I just threw up of Daz Beatty, because this has come up a lot, and I do not know who does this on a regular basis, if it's done on a regular basis, but I know companies talk about like refreshing computers X number of years and things like that. How much of this is done? Plan the retirement date when introducing new technology. James, or Sam, you start first. I'm sorry.
So this is a best practice. I'm going to tell you, it happens with big stuff, right? Stuff that's multi-million dollars, right? It does not happen with everything that's in your asset inventory, and so part of the risk from a technical debt perspective, right, is that it's easy to keep your eye on the stuff that's massive because it's in fact massive and it's in front of everybody on the board and every C-suite person sees it. That's super easy to have eyes on and do the right thing for. It's really hard to do the right thing when nobody's watching you. And so cutting corners on those things that nobody watches is really where we start accumulating our technical debt. And so I don't worry about the big, huge projects. I worry about the small to medium-sized projects because that's where we're really getting in trouble.
James, what would you add to this? And again, how much of the planning for retirement when you buy new technology actually happens? Because I think this falls into, those people who provide good advice and it never actually happens. What do you think, James?
Oh, it's like the definition of consultant half the time. No. At the end of the day, Sam, I couldn't agree more, right? And I love how you were kind of introducing integrity into the process of technology, right? It's a lot of it is, keeping yourself honest around not only the capabilities of the tech, but the technology's roadmap, for example, because it can be difficult to predict when a given technology is going to kind of fall by the wayside or be retired. But it does make sense, especially if you are building a legitimate risk registry, to build in kind of follow-up dates, check-ins, things like that, to evaluate whether this next gen technology today is still the tip of the spear we need it to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, et cetera. But 9 times out of 10, when I'm working with organizations, they're so focused on trying to solve problems for 3 to 6 months that they consider anything outside of 12 months to be almost crystal ball territory, and therefore kind of a quote unquote waste of time. It turns into a strategy conversation, right? Where there aren't any explicit commitments, just kind of, more emotional discussions, right? More, we'll say optics statements is what I like to call them, right? Where people are saying the right things that everybody wants to hear. But in reality, once we got past the 6-month planning mark, we've kind of fallen off the wayside a little bit from reality. So when it comes to, dealing with that side of the house, I think it is critically important to try to build something like that in. So, for example, when you look at, this is a little bit kind of a wild offset here, but when you look at like aircraft maintenance in the military, for example, there are lots of different ways to not only articulate the level of risk a given issue on an aircraft represents, but also to put different levels of shelf life on how long that risk stays low before it becomes something that actually grounds the aircraft that 6 months ago was minor. But because you didn't deal with it at that time, i.e. you would introduce kind of the mechanical version of technical debt, you will fix this problem or this aircraft simply will not fly, right? So if you can take something like that into, the, civilian or commercial context, right? Because I know in the government on that side of the house, a lot of times they'll do something similar. Obviously, it's a lot harder to do on the commercial side of the house than the civilian side of the house because there isn't nearly as much unity of purpose, right? There isn't nearly as much, I will say, importance laid upon risk and how we address it and things like that. But you can introduce lightly, those types of activities to simply say, as you're implementing a platform and adding things to the risk registry, if this isn't resolved by this time, at a minimum, we will reevaluate this with our architectural review board, for example, that includes our cybersecurity architects that define, like, yesterday that was a 4 out of 10 risk. Today it's an 8. We do need to build a project and define funding and develop a roadmap for resolving this issue.
All right. I'm going to throw both of these questions up one at a time because they both sort of address the same issue, sort of taking a couple of different angles. Okay, first, Lewis says, any good advice on how to prioritize vulnerability management or cyber hygiene for an environment full of tech debt, which is what we're dealing here, right? But I also want to add this question here from Sumaya Chowdhury, said, I've observed business leaders demanding shiny new features and resisting engineering calls for addressing tech debt because it doesn't move the needle on ROI. Like, it's interesting. You're coming in to talk to us about technical debt, James, and GuidePoint security is, but most organizations, that's not what they're addressing. Or if they're smart, they're addressing this will replace tech debt you might have. So just curious if you guys can talk about the cost and value prop. Like, how do you deal with the classic set of like, yes, we want to move forward. Yes, we want to get something new, cool and new, so we have new capabilities. But this is this anchor that's holding us down. I'm sure these kinds of discussions come up again and again. Yes, Sam?
All the time. And I think what people don't understand is ROI is a metric a lot of business leaders look at from a revenue side, but from the IT side, right? IT is a cost center. And so if you truly look at the cost for some of our technical debt, you're going to spend less money, right, addressing some of your technical debt. You're going to have less downtime. You're going to spend less resources, right? Maybe we're going to upgrade some of our servers and go to less servers. If you truly do the business analytics, your business case 9 times out of 10 saves money. Now, right? You're not generating revenue because you're a cost center. You're not a revenue center. But saving money to most organizations is a win. And so as long as you can build the story around how fixing your technical debt saves you money, I have never been unsuccessful in trying to tackle some of that debt that we're trying to get rid of.
All right. Anything to add to that, James?
Sure. I think that quantifying and adding a dollar value to addressing risk or leaving it alone is the challenge that's been in place for CISOs for a long time. I think, honestly, that was part of probably the genesis of the CISO position becoming what it is today, is somebody has to define what the actual dollar amount is that's tied to either addressing risk or leaving it alone, right? What are we doing here? And how does this map to the rest of the budget, right? So nowadays, obviously, there are different tools and things like that out there that can help you quantify and define that level of risk. But I think that's probably, to Sam's point, a big part of the answer to that is defining how much money are we actually going to save by mitigating this risk, or how much are we going to be able to believe, because that's obviously a big part of it, is selling the belief, right, of that money savings that can't necessarily be quantified unless there's an actual breach. Right. So there's a significant amount of research that has to be in some cases when it comes to defending a decision to address technical debt versus focusing on this other next gen thing that this one team wants to do. Because, of course, when it comes down to operations, engineering new things, it's all about trade-offs. What are we having to give up in order to go address this technical debt? And what does the balance sheet look like at the end of the day for addressing it? Are we going to be in the black or are we going to be in the red? And unfortunately, that is generally the decision path that people are going to follow. But I think that cyber has come a long way, both professionally, philosophically, and technically, at helping address that risk and bringing in dollar amounts and quantifying that risk in a way that's believable by C-suites and boards.
All right. Go ahead. And I want to get to our next.
Let me just
go
add
ahead,
one
Sam.
more thing, because I think to that point, the other thing CISOs have started becoming really good at, and I think it's a skill that all CISOs need, is to figure out how to sell the story, right? I realize we're all technical people. We all have really good ability to tell the technical story. You need to start figuring out how to attach it to your business. What is the business impact going to be if we continue doing this technical debt, right? What is the future of the business going to look like? And if you can story tell that, right, you're going to get a lot farther, right, with your C-suite leaders.
Very, very good point. All right. Just a couple quick things. If you have not gone to the poll, again, that's the third icon, I think, right there with the little bar charts, and clicked on it to get a warm handoff to our fine people over at Guide Point Security, please go ahead and do that now. Also, I haven't mentioned this in a while. Click the link at the bottom of the screen to register for our next event, which will be at the end of January, Hacking Platformization. Please do that now. Now, what's more important is you got a call came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right. These are our bad ideas. I have warned our guests about how this goes. Most of our audience knows how this goes. All right. This is actually, Paul Lanzi actually had two bad ideas that are so go hand in hand that I'm going to double them up for both of you. So one of them I already mentioned. So this is only roll out end-of-life solutions so the amount of tech debt is set from the start and doesn't grow over time. And by the way, James, you're going to answer first on this. And then I'm going to add this other one that Paul had here, which is when acquiring a company, fire everyone who knows about their tech debt so you don't have to deal with it. All right? So I like this idea of essentially only get end-of-life stuff and then, and then get rid of the people who know about the technical debt. So with that being said, James, why do you want to do both of these things right now?
Well, certainly when it comes to firing everybody, that's going to reduce costs significantly. And as far as the end-of-life technology, we were hoping to further reduce costs by reducing the training budget. So as long as we only use things that are end-of-life, there's generally no enablement around it, therefore no training to buy. So between no training and no personnel,
There is a
significant
lot of
reduction in
cost
cost.
savings. Go ahead. Let's hear from
We
you.
don't have to
Samantha.
buy upgrades either, right? So we got all kinds of savings, right? No upgrades, all kinds of stuff we can save.
Very good. Very good. All right. Kudos to both of you, and kudos to Paul Lanzi also on that one. I thought that was sufficiently awful ideas. Okay. Now this is another aggressive way of going about this. This is from Dwayne Gran here. Add on, so that he's saying you have to lean into tech debt here. Add on piles and piles of tech debt and become too big to fail. We've seen this happen for finance and automotive industries, so it should work for cybersecurity. All right, Sam, I'm going to start with you. Why do you want to do this?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the government can't allow, I'm in healthcare. We can't fail. So fundamentally, I'm just going to keep buying all my end of life stuff, right? We still need to take care of people. So the government's definitely going to bail me out. I'm going to definitely use this strategy.
All right, the audience seems to like that one a lot. All right, I'm going to go to you, James. Why do you want to do this? Essentially, just literally lean in, look for the technical debt, acquire the technical debt, make it part of your brand, your MO. We are the tech debt company.
Yeah, of course. So the more technical debt and dependencies that we create, right, the harder it is to get rid of us and the less work that we have to do because things quickly transition to that's just how we've always done it. So it's actually an early retirement plan for everybody where you don't actually have to bite into your 401k while still collecting a paycheck over time.
There you go.
By the way, James Sparenberg, I like this here. Hold on, let me pull his quote up here. I'll quote my last CFO here. A cost center is something that getting rid of it will increase revenue. Getting rid of IT does not increase revenue, despite what we are being told.
Maybe
I don't know. It depends. We could outsource it, right? If we're doing bad ideas, let's just outsource all of it. It'll be fine. Everything will be fine.
Yeah. Well, all right. I think, by the way, this is a great, I just want to say kudos to everyone participating today, to my guests, Sam and James, and also to the audience as well. Everyone is knocking it out of the park. I couldn't be more impressed with everyone. So kudos to everyone for doing a killer job our last show of 2024. All right, let's go. Let me see. We got questions here. I like this one from James Sparenberg also. How much is tech debt impacted by one-off and cowboy mitigation that never gets documented or followed up on? I think this falls under the just like the discoverability. Like, I didn't know we had that. Now we got tech debt kind of a situation. Yes, you're both laughing like, oh my God, yes, this happens all the time. James, you start.
Sure. So I would say that one-off and cowboy mitigation that isn't documented is in and of itself technical debt. It's just a grenade that hasn't gone off yet, right? It's there. You can see it. You know it exists, but it hasn't hurt you yet, which is frankly, at the end of the day, technical debt. And 9 times out of 10, that leads to other teams seeing that, understanding that that's okay now, and they go off and do their own thing. So it's kind of like a mind virus for technology that if you allow those things to happen, it scales quickly. And before you know it, you've got a pile of tech debt that was actually all best intentions towards solving tech debt.
Mm-hmm. Sam,
Chris called it shadow tech debt. That's exactly what it is. It's shadow tech debt. You don't know about it until it blows up in your face.
Pretty good. All right. Let me call out. We were calling him out earlier, but Paul Lanzi, set aside percentage here. Actually, I can showcase these. I'm sorry. Set aside a percentage every sprint to work on explicitly dealing with tech debt. Let me ask you: does any company do just that? Because that is a great tip. First of all, have you seen anyone who does it? I'm sure that's what you're trying to get your clients to do, James. But I mean, are you successful? Yes.
I think so. And in fact, it's kind of funny. The teams that are best at doing this are generally some of the worst offenders when it comes to tech debt as well. And I'm talking about, anybody that involves having to write or deal with code or programming in any way, shape, or form. So it could be your DevOps team, it could be your DBAs, it could be your cloud team, however you kind of self-organized internally. But for years, I've worked with organizations where as part of their sprints, they include a set aside amount of time for identifying and dealing with technical debt. And I think it makes sense just because of the cadence and the transaction nature of what they're doing in the DevOps pipeline. They can't afford to let something sit for 6 months. They can barely afford to let something sit for 6 days because of the pace of iteration, which I think is what really drives how quickly people will either identify and mitigate or be negatively affected by technical debt.
This and James Sparenberg has this quote here: better develop a regular program of assigning tech debt tickets to your team every sprint. If it's too big for a sprint or individual, learn how to slice and dice. And that gets to our discussion we had earlier on regarding, how to eat an elephant, that kind of thing. Let me ask, do you guys, Aman Sood has this 10% better tip, and does this work, I guess is really my question. Use a ratchet system, lower the vulnerability by X each time, using that new number as the ceiling threshold. Does that work? Either of you?
It depends on what it is, right? In some instances, for sure, right? In my world, right, I've got so many end of life things. Reducing risk by 10% is a mitigation, and it is a technique that we use. And then I move on to something higher risk, and we continue taking bites at the apple. Mm-hmm. It truly depends on what you're looking at, to be honest with you. There is some tech debt that's too big to reduce by a percentage, and you have to do it all at once. And so I hate to tell you it depends, but guess what? It depends.
Yeah, well, most things in technology. What have you seen, James? Like, can you reduce certain things by percentages? Because my feeling with tech debt, it's always like rip and replace. Yes, or am I wrong? Like, let me ask you. Let me set it this way: what percentage of tech debt issues are rip and replace, and what percentage are slow mitigations over time?
Well, I'm with Sam on this one. I would say it kind of depends. Okay. So for me, it's kind of a yes if, right? So when it comes to being able to ratchet down like that, right? The dependency there, dependency, wow, I was speaking of that earlier, right? The dependency there is the ability to measure drift, right? So positive and negative drift, meaning if you establish a baseline, do you have the ability and the situational awareness to define whether or not you've actually reduced risk by 10% and where? But also, do you have the ability to identify and define whether or not that 10% risk reduction over time and churn and operational tempo and everything else actually went reduced to 5 just because of the day-to-day churn? So if you want to be able to ratchet risk, I think it's totally possible, especially in the cyberspace, given all the technology out there that allows you to kind of map yourself against different frameworks and things like that. Cloud service providers are really, really good at this, for example. But you have to be able to very clearly and articulately define, what the technical debt is, what the risk is, clearly defined by it, and then what your drift is. For example, in Azure, AWS, any one of them, there are security tools out there that will literally measure how well you measure up to 800.171, for example, over time. So unless you have a mechanism like that, and then personnel dedicated to evaluating that risk, or that drift rather, and communicating that to leadership so that they can then make decisions, you have to have those things in place. Otherwise, you're really just kind of guessing at that point.
All right. I'm going to get to our close. And let me remind everybody, if you've not clicked the link at the bottom of the screen, please click it now, because I'm going to be changing it in just a minute or two. Or actually, our producer, Aaron, will change it in a minute or two. Go ahead. It's not going to take you out of this discussion. Just click and register for our next event, Hacking Platformization. But I just want to get to a few closing items, and then we're going to finish with last questions and then wrap this whole show up. So huge thanks to your company, James, GuidePoint Security. Again, if you have not gone to the poll and clicked on just that to get a nice warm handoff, please go to that right now. We will make that happen. In fact, we'll make it happen next week. Starting in about 97 minutes from now will be our Cybersecurity Headlines Weekend Review Show with Jimmy Sanders, who's the president of ISSA International. And, by the way, they're going to have their big, I think it's their 50th anniversary in Houston this year, which I will be at in April 11th, I believe. And Jimmy Sanders is organizing that whole fun event. So if you're in Houston or nearby or want to come by, that will be a fun event to go to. But anyways, Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review, that will be starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That is on our YouTube channel, and you can participate in that. Essentially, the whole week's news in about 25 minutes. Get some input on that. Now, stick around for our meetup. Look at that. Look how fast that happened. Super fast. If you click that link at the bottom, That will open up your Discord, and you can join us for our meetup. This is what it looks like. In the lower left-hand corner is where your AV buttons are for coming on video, audio, anything you'd like to talk about. You can just actually type in meetup : in the chat room and say, hey, I want to talk about this, and we will make sure that we bring that issue up as well. And then lastly, want to sponsor a Super Cyber Friday? Well, our next available one will be the end of January. So please email us at info@CISOseries.com, and we would love to have you on. All right. This is the question I always ask at the very end of the show. I'm going to start with you, Sam. Is there anything about technical debt that we have not talked about that we should have talked about? What do you think?
I will say we touched on empathy a little bit, but I think there is a conversation to be had about understanding how you align empathy with urgency related to technical debt, right? And how you have a robust conversation with your leadership, your senior leadership, the board, right? To really align urgency and empathy. It is something that exists. It's something that, we're never going to end up getting rid of, but we need to create the appropriate sense of urgency to resolve what technical debt we can in a very timely manner. And so aligning those two things is incredibly important for CISO. And I really think it's something that most CISOs need to do right on an ongoing basis.
Very, very good tip. All right. Same question to you, James. Is there anything we have not talked about with regards to technical debt that we should have been talking about?
I think we touched on it a little bit, but just people need to recognize that you're never going to not have technical debt.
Yes.
Right. Technical debt needs to be included in your operational tempo, right along with just as much important as the next gen technology that you're trying to put in your environment, or any kind of initiative, any kind of shifts, changes, etc. You're never going to not have technical debt. So it's a completely unrealistic expectation to get rid of all of it. Right. It's much more realistic to say we're going to mitigate it as much as possible as we continue to implement new capabilities in our environment. And we're going to carve out, sections of our sprints to be tactically capable of dealing with technical debt as well. It's a full spectrum operation. It cannot be just tactical. It has to be strategic and visionary as well.
By the way, I want everyone to know that you see Diane Crable posted something about jobs and helping out with jobs. Just want to show that I gave her the thumbs up to go ahead and post that. So please feel free to respond to Diane there as well. All right, we have come to the end of our show, and I want to thank both Sam and James. And I also want to thank absolutely our awesome chat room and many of our regulars who are in there as well. I can't begin to tell you how thrilled I am that you participated, that you get involved, that you come to our Super Cyber Friday chats every available Friday that we do it, and because this event exists because of you. So we're hoping to double, triple, quadruple the size audience that comes to Super Cyber Friday. So I just ask that you please just share and share it along with everybody else as you continue to do that. All right, here's what's going to happen. Everyone, I want everyone, because it's going to be our last one of the year, click the button. Join us in the post-event meetup on Discord. Click that button below and join us over there, and we will have our last discussion of the year. Love to hear all your thoughts. Anything you want to talk about, bring it up. We can continue talking about technical debt and anything else you would like to discuss. Huge thanks to our producers, Andrew, Aaron, and Rich for making this happen. Aaron, you can take us out.